was a call out to bring back independent random inspections. So just wondering what your thoughts are.
The simple answer is a regulation issue. It's about regulators and legislation. We don't have any say in that. We probably have our own opinions about that. I think that there definitely needs to be a lot more monitoring of installations, my own opinion. But unfortunately, the cost of that almighty dollar affects how many people they can employ to do that. Places like Victoria and Tasmania have a testing program effectively attached to installation work. Then you have a testing company that comes in and checks that work. That hasn't happened in any of the other states as far as I know. West Australians still pretty proactive with checking installations, but the other states don't have the money to have those people going out there. Queensland's not bad, but their local distributors, actually, the power supply companies are a bit more control in that. So yeah, look, it is a regulation issue. I'd love to see it personally come back, and so that people aren't doing the wrong thing, they get caught early, but not much we can do about it.
It's also with products as well, that through the electrical equipment safety scheme, there is check testing being done, and that check testing is finding product that's being imported into the country that's not compliant, even though they've got test certificates. So it is, the products aren't matching. And there's a lot of evidence that self-testing is not reliable. Whether people are actually fraudulently doing something wrong or just making mistakes, an independent check is a very effective tool, and I would support it.
There was a suggestion for change around the exhibition and event space, particularly around the fact that anyone conducting this work must be licensed. And the question that came through was that every exhibition plugging into extension leads, into switchboards, with switchboards catching fire, outlets melting, cables too hot to pick up or draw current. Work cover says anyone can do this work as it's all plugged in. Forklifts running over three-phase cables and extension leads without any protection. It's just a matter of time before someone's killed. Would anyone like to comment on this?
It is electrical work in the main, but yes, it can be plugged in. But there are requirements that are in that standard 3002.
Yep.
3002.
Yeah.
Shows and carnivals that they've got to comply with in regard to, even if they're plugging and connecting, there are rules around that. So yes, if you plug and play, you don't have to be licensed, but there are other things that you need to know about protection of cable and all that sort of stuff. I'm hoping the shows and carnival people, the carnies of the world, are using that standard, and they would protect themselves. And also electricians, again, we talk about opportunity, and sometimes an electrician has got the opportunity that maybe he associates himself with the carny and goes along and makes sure there's someone to make sure everything's right. Certainly there'll be the shonky stuff that happens, but I hope that's minimal.
There is a standard, it's just whether people adopt it. And there's also the issue that it's only regulated when it's plugged in to a supply. And nowadays a lot of music events and that have basically a truck with its own power supply generator, and that's totally unregulated.
Definitely we're looking at the application and so the scope of the document, so that it may become a bit more user-friendly to the carnival owner when he does his moves, that he does have an electrician to contact to say, look, I can plug it all together, but I need to know where the cables have got to run and how I'm going to do it.
Given that elsewhere in the world, DC reticulation seems to be a growth area, should and will the wiring rules include more information in anticipation?
Well, we've already added the Appendix Q, which is for DC circuit protection. It's only information. And that came from the fact that in US and Japan, they are now driving data centres with all their active equipment is actually run off the DC, off the solar. The solar feeds the active equipment plus batteries. At night, the battery feeds the active equipment. So DC's being used there. So we sort of thought, well, we talk about AC and DC right throughout the book. Do we pull all the DC out and put it into an appendix? But then it would be a duplication of a lot of stuff. So what we thought was we'd just write this appendix, which is about information about what you need to think about for protection of DC circuits. And giving some information for the, at the end of the day, if someone does say, we want to do a DC data centre. So I think that's going to get expanded on. By the time the revision's done, I think there's going to be a lot more DC used around the place. Maybe in smaller areas, but certainly there's a lot of cost benefit.
Conversion of voltage at 50 hertz is not very efficient, whereas with DC to DC conversion, you use a high frequency and you get a very high efficiency. So there's less losses in DC to DC conversion than there is in AC conversion. So there's energy efficiency gains all over by sticking with the DC system. And with solar penetration, you're starting with DC, so it's easier to go DC to DC and it's more efficient.
The thing that people need to be aware of is how to select the appropriate protection devices and how to install them around polarity sensitivity and things like that.
As the use of power over Ethernet increases and the technology advances, what has the wiring rules done to actually address this? We
do recognise that it's coming. At the moment, there's another committee called CT1, which is Data Cabling Committee, and they monitor all the developments with the IEC at the moment. And like I said, that's where those classifications came, and there's a 10 amp upward, so it can be anything, and that really starts to fall into our realm. And already the IEC installation rules people are looking at power over Ethernet and how they need to move with that. So I'm suggesting by the time we do our revision, there's going to be another part of this book which will have to be about that, even if it's just a reference off to somewhere to provide some information, somewhere to look.
The current PoE is not actually that effective in Australia because the connectors that are used, they're limited voltage and limited current. PoE generally has to be a star configuration, so you've got to feed a cable to every single light, and it's not very cost effective with Australian wiring systems to go PoE. It's been effective in America, and they've done it because they have a lot more difficult installations with the way they insulate their buildings. But as it's pushing up where the PoE is getting up to 90 volts and 10 amps, it's quite a significant thing, but you have to develop different connectors, different systems, and when that becomes mature, it'll probably make sense to put it into Australia as well. But it wasn't put in the wiring rules because there was really no demand. It didn't make sense, it was too expensive.
Okay. So the next question's actually a grammatical question, which I believe someone thinks that meaning has changed. It's in relation to table 6.1, with around electrical equipment for baths and showers. And it's led to the question of, does an outlet now have to have both RCD protection and either separated or SELV or PELV supply, or should there be an or between RCD protection and separated supply?
Now, this is very interesting. I'm glad someone's brought it up because
that sounds like a politician. I'm glad you raised that.
And I don't know if there's a political answer to this either. Basically, the editors, in their wisdom, at standard. Oh God, I've got to get myself in. They, in a lot of our clauses, we have an A, B, C, D, and
points, whatever they are.
Yeah. So, in English, if you just read it as a sentence, you will do this with a comma, that, or the other, right? So when editors looked at it, they put item A down with a comma, item B down with an or at the end, and item C down as the other. So we've already had so many complaints that people have asked the same question: do we have to do this and this, or we do this? Because I didn't understand it. It's not grammatically right. So I don't know if we've done anything on 6.1. I think we probably have. We've been through most of the book.
We talked a lot about it at the last meeting, about
yeah,
where there should be
and
more
so
ands
we've
and
actually
more ors.
got the editors to put back, so it'll be not grammatical. You will do this or that or the other. So that's what it means. If it's got an and in there, that means you've got to do all of them. So hopefully we're addressing all those. So it'll be
spell it out.
A and B and C and D and if you need to do all of them. So yeah, look, it's a good point. If anyone sees it, that's what it means. You read it as an English sentence rather than these points. For all the punters that are going to use the wiring rules, hopefully they've all got their copies now, and the preface right at the very beginning, I urge you to go and have a look at that, because at that preface it gives you an overview of all the sections and the major changes. And it's actually doesn't point out that specific clause, but it does say insulation, something that's, we've changed some insulation in regard to cables through, in or under that insulation. Yeah. So it is actually highlighted.
Yeah, that preface is a very valuable thing.
Yeah. The issue, why it came into being, if I can just put that in there, nowadays it's so important to make sure your house or your installation has got the right insulation. You may have built the house with only insulation in the roof, and then one day you decide you want to put soundproofing or whatever in internal walls, and there's ways that they just drill holes through your noggins and your top plates and just feed that insulation and gradually fill it up. So it is envisaged that you could put insulation in internal walls down the track. So it's just, again, another reminder that if there is an internal wall and it hasn't got insulation now, it could have in the future, which may mean that you may just need to be a bit careful about your cables that you run.
The next question is, given that projects from design to tender to construction to handover can take several years for commercial buildings, how does the introduction of the new rules affect contractors who are mid-project?
Effectively, the revision doesn't affect any design that may be underway prior to publication. So I might just read it here. The industry had a 6-month grace period to apply, so from June to January 2019. So any project design, quoting or installation before June 2018 would continue as per 2007. Pretty straightforward. Any project design, quoting or installation commenced after June 2018 should have been undertaken to 2018 edition, but it could have used the 2007 edition. You didn't have to apply it. But any project design, quoting or installation commenced after January 2019 shall be to the 2018. So that was the sort of leeway. I think most regulators have played that line with it, and I think it's fair enough. So effectively, if it was before publication and it's billed after publication, it could be to 2007. So
it relates to the approval for the job to start.
Yeah. So a contractor may have spent a heap of time getting in May last year. You could have done a quote, put it out, but it's not going to start construction until December or January 2019. There's no reason for him to go back and update it unless the owners of the premise, the installation, say, well, we want it to the latest wiring rules. Well, then that'll be a change to the quote, and we'll up the ante.
Yeah. But if the building approval's already been issued,
yeah,
then you stay with that, even though you may start work. This situation happened with smoke alarms, where the requirements for smoke alarms changed, and but if your building approval was in place, then you could, even though the building may not be finished for 2 years, you could still install the previous design of smoke alarm. But if your building approval happened after May, then you had to have the new ones.